Hey, everybody, welcome back to The Overlay, a poker podcast brought to you by CCG Poker Radio and Paramount Social Club. We have Brandon with us again, 2 weeks in a row, Brando.
Yeah, it feels good to be back.
Feels good to be
It's
back.
almost like,
Baseball,
it's almost like I'm part
basketball,
of this.
hockey, golf. All of those sports are
football.
back. I mean, golf's been back longer.
Golf's been back the longest,
Yes.
but that's a very socially distanced sport.
You know, they keep saying it's socially distanced, and I'm not trying to petition that golf should not be played because I would cry horribly if I couldn't play golf. It would be like cruel and unusual punishment. But like you're still standing like right next to people when you both are like going to putt a short putt, especially like at like a golf tournament. It's not like they're waiting for the one guy to go out and putt. Like they're still used to like keeping the game moving, that they have difficulties like staying far apart at that point. It is really awkward though at the end of the tournament when typically they shake hands, take off your hat, take off your sunglasses, go shake hands, shake the caddy's hands, shake the scorer's hand. They don't do that anymore. Everybody's like,
What do they do?
They're either fist bumping, not a fist bump, like a wrist,
Fist bump?
no, like a side wrist bump.
Like an elbow.
Not even
The
an elbow. It's more like, and it's kind of elbow, but like a forearm.
Like a forearm.
Yeah, I
Okay.
guess forearm bump, but like towards the bottom third of your forearm. So like it's like a side wrist bump.
I gotcha.
Right, which is probably like the most uncool body bump
No,
that
it's
you can
definitely
do.
not smooth, but
Nah, you look like you're making like two like I don't know crosses in front of your. Anyways, we've gone into a weird rabbit hole.
I was about to say, how do we just have a 15-minute prep on exactly?
I know this is why we
Spoiler,
shouldn't
guys,
prep
we
because we
actually
never.
prep.
Yeah, we never prep, and then now we're like
45 seconds in, and we're talking about forearm bumping
Right.
in golf.
Yep. Yeah. It's a good thing this is a free podcast because if people were paying for a premium subscription, they might not listen after this episode. But anyways, episode
No renewals.
24. Hey, everybody. The Overlay. Brandon and Kent. The old band is back for at least another week. This week, we're going to have a Tournament Directors Edition episode. We're going to talk about rules. We're going to talk about etiquette. And we're really going to kind of get into the nitty gritty of like, correct me if I'm wrong here, Brandon, you know, when to call floor, how to call floor, what the floor should say, what you can expect the floor to do. You always have a table captain at your table, and sometimes that captain's shitty and he's crashing into icebergs left and right. So I want this episode for people to feel more comfortable about the rules themselves in tournament poker. I want them to feel like they understand, you know, a little bit more when it's appropriate to like when you should call the floor, when you should not. I always find that when people are like, oh, I didn't know I could call a floor. I'm like, of course you like. I would almost rather you call when it's like a not a cool time, like a, you know, well, that was overdone. Like you don't need to yell floor when like you lost a player. You know what I mean? Like that's a player down yell. But like, you know, obviously people are like nervous, like they don't want to bother someone. And I feel like the floor personnel is there to help players in the tournament, especially when there's a rules discrepancy. And there's nothing worse than getting knocked out of a tournament or losing a big pot or whatever the case may be and feeling uncomfortable to ask what the rules are, right?
Right.
I
And I think what I hate when they end up calling the floor like after the fact.
Right.
It's
Yes.
like, well, now like I'm
too late.
justifying one side of things, or it's like we just we just wanted a clarification after some guy's stacking $1,000 pot. It's like, well, now I'm in a really terrible situation because I'm going to make somebody mad no matter what. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
yeah, it's always
earlier is better.
It's always, well, that's like one of those things where like two guys are arguing about the rules and they want the floor to make the decision and again, decide who is right. What I always find is like the hand runs out, it's over, the pot is being awarded to one player, and then a person goes, floor. Earlier in the hand, he flashed a card to this person, so his hand should be dead. Be like, well, no, you don't get to call it now, and then 45 seconds after the hand is over, you can't call in and be like, oh, wait, there was this weird rules discrepancy earlier that I'd like a ruling on because it affected the outcome of the hand and I didn't like the outcome, so now I'm going to call floor.
Yeah. No,
Does that make sense? Like if there's an issue or you don't know what's going on or you want to talk about it, stop right then and there, stop the action, call the floor over and ask the question rather than what a lot of people seem to do which I'm not going to call it an angle or angle shooting, which is like the poker player's term for bending the rules to your favor, borderline cheating.
Yep.
Maybe closer to cheating than bending the rules, but it never fails. It's like you can't allow the hand to run out, be mad about the outcome, and then go, hey, wait a second, this guy did this or that or this, and that shouldn't have been okay. You can't back the hand up at that point. Can't be like, oh, you're on the river and you're unhappy with the river, and now you want to talk about a flop screw up. Let's go ahead and remove that turn and flop and go. It's not, that doesn't happen. Like once the cards are out, like you can't go backwards. Right?
Yeah, and it's one of those things.
It's almost impossible.
And it's just because like you never would have called the floor if you won the pot. So
it's funny.
A two-sided coin.
It's something that happens to me, and I don't say it to be rude or mean, but or condescending or any way, shape, or form. But it's like when somebody will email me about or talk to me at an event and be like, I'm upset about this, and like I need to tell you why I'm mad, and I'm just like, sometimes I'll be hearing it and I'll go, would you still be telling me this if you won the hand? Or are you only upset because you lost the hand? Again, you can't go back. It's hard for me to go backwards. I can't go back. If I had a time machine, I would do much cooler stuff than fix hands in poker.
Correct. All right, so let's get into some rules.
Yep. First
I forgot
rule.
all of them that we prepped. So
no, I wrote them down, so we're good.
Oh, you did? Okay,
yeah.
Good.
But I can't open my iPad.
Oh, well, I have a live, just so you guys know, I'm trying to figure out a finale to this episode with a crazy rules situation that happened in Maryland live. I'm texting somebody who's texting his friend who's texting the kid who actually did it. This is all unfolding in real time.
Nice. So and that guy saw Ferris Bueller pass out at 31 Flavors?
Yes, basically.
Nice.
So I'm hoping we can get the actual situation relayed back through the friend of a friend all the way back to me within this episode so we can talk about it at the end of the episode.
What'd be really cool is if that guy was Kevin Bacon and you found a way to connect yourself all the way back to Kevin Bacon. You ever play that game?
Yeah.
It's a good prop bet. It's a good prop game.
I know what it is, but
6 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's cool. Anyways, Tournament Directors Edition, question 1, or topic number 1. We wanted to talk about the 50% rule. Brandon, can you give us a definition of what a 50% rule is, or what they're referring to, I guess is more accurate?
So the 50% rule is when we're just going to go right into an example, and the blinds are 200, 400 in a tournament, and a guy throws out 600 in chips, or 500 in chips, or 700 in chips. Basically, any number of chips between the actual blind and a legal raise.
Can we just put out for a second, if the blinds are 200, 400, the opening minimum raise would be what?
800.
Yeah, sometimes people are like, oh no, it's only 600 because, but that's not true. So it's 800. Go ahead. So now we're talking about if someone tries to put out less than a legal raise, but more than a call.
Right. So this is basically accidental, and Correct. This is where the rule comes into effect, where if they put out at least 50% of a raise, then it gets rounded up to a full raise. If they put out less than 50% of a raise, then it goes rounded down to a call. So in our example, 600 or more would be constituted as a raise, and it would go up to 800.
Right. You would have to complete the actual bet, which means 600 is not a valid bet. And being that it is more than or at 50% of what an actual raise needs to be, you round up, basically, is what they're saying. There's no intention taken into it. Be like, oh, I accidentally just dropped the wrong number of chips. Doesn't matter. It's just a number at that point. If it's 50% or more, it goes up to a raise, which means you have to make it $800. The action continues as if it was an $800 bet. If the blinds were 200, 400, and you somehow managed to put out 500 at that point, you're under the 50% rule, under that 50% number, and it would just be constituted as a call. You just give him back his change or make change, or it's at that point, it's just a call. So there's no going, I meant to raise. Well, cool. Next time, say raise or put in the correct amount of chips.
Yep. This goes without saying. This is obviously with no verbal
correct.
If somebody says raise and throws out 500, well, then it goes to 800, as long as they say raise first, because verbal's always binding. So when in doubt, always announce your.
I always make an inclination towards the dealer. I either say raise when I want to raise, or I'll give them like a boop boop boop. Like I'll give them a thumbs up, like and the motion going upwards is in like I'm raising, and then I'll say a number so that way. For me, it's like a
whole audience. I bet the whole audience there knew when you went boop 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 that was your thumb going up, because
right.
I knew it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my. I have a trifecta of things I do. I go hand motion, thumbs going up. I make the noise, boop 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 boop, and then I also will then say 700 or whatever it is.
Yeah,
which is good. We also wanted to do, so the 50% rule is pretty basic, but I do feel like
as easy as it gets.
It is, and it is a rule that comes up a lot. Either people, it normally happens later in tournaments when people will try to make a raise and do it incorrectly. I've seen it all the time, like blinds are like,
I think most of the time they just don't realize.
No, or they don't realize or here's a perfect example. Blinds are, 10,000, 20,000, and the next level it goes up to 12, 24, and they just don't realize I'm going to make it, 40K. Like, well, you can't. It's supposed to be 48 because the blinds just went up. I didn't even realize they went up. And at that point, you're still raising, and you have to it's over the 50%. So you're fine. It's just one of those things that's like, then it takes the guesswork out of it. It's just based on math, and it depends on where how much you put out. That's when you make the mistake. The 50% rule, let's talk about how that is applied when a player goes all in. Ooh, I put you in the spot and you just stalled.
Well, I was getting a text message, but I feel like this is where people get confused because that rule doesn't apply to this situation, and they think that it does.
Well, that's why we're bringing it up, Brandon.
Right. So when this whole thing of the next segue is the action reopen or not?
So let's give it like a basic idea. We're towards the end of the hand, turn or river. Let's say it's the turn. So there's already money in the pot. The betting is probably higher than what the actual blinds are, what the minimums are. But the idea is player 1 bets 10,000, and then player 2 goes all in for 14,000, and then the third player in the hand asks, well, is the action reopened? What are the options that each player has continuing throughout the hand?
Yes. So that all depends on what the initial blinds are.
Correct.
Right. So if the blinds, we're going to just stick with 2,000, 4,000, because you went up to, and then the guy raised to 10,000, which is a raise of 6,000. So the minimum raise for the next player to actually make a legal raise would be 16,000. Right, it would be 4 to 10, which is a raise of 6, and then a raise of 6 on top of the 10 would be 16. People think that you have to double it to 20. You don't. You have to double the raise. The raise was 6,000. Easy way to think about it: 6 plus 6 plus the blind is 4, which is 16. Or 10 plus 6, also 16. Not 20. Any way you go about it. So if the guy shoves for anything under 16, the action is closed to that initial raiser, because the guy who shoved did not make a legal raise. He just went all in for more, but he didn't raise.
Correct.
Therefore, the guy who made it 10 would be raising himself if he was allowed to raise.
Meaning
he's the last person
he makes
to
it
make
10,
a legal raise.
The other guy makes it 14 by going all in. However, the minimum bet that he would need to make to constitute a raise is actually 16,000. So it doesn't qualify as a raise. Has nothing to do with it's over 50% or it's close or blah, blah, blah. It's just a number, right? It has to be at least 16,000, correct?
Correct. So I'm actually getting excited because somehow this example worked out perfect.
Yep.
If the guy
it didn't work out perfect by accident. I just architect this.
Oh, did you? Because I'm the one who made the blinds.
I designed. Design sounds smarter. I designed this as the architect of the question to work out this way. But go ahead.
So if the guy shoved for 15,500, that is more than half. Right, because
clearly it's only 500 chips. It's one purple chip short, or brown. We now have brown colored $500 chips.
Yes,
not a fan
of. And then these guys are even now. If you back it up, and you're gonna say these guys don't realize that it only has to be 16,000, but they think it's got to be 20,000 because it's got to be double. It's still over that because it's 5,000. So any way you look at it, it is more than half of a raise. But the action is still closed because it's not 16,000. And people mix up these two rules. The rule that we went out earlier in this rule, just because it's more than half doesn't mean that it's reopened. He has to make a full raise. You cannot round.
And again,
when the player's all in.
The caveat here is that he's all in, correct?
Right.
Right. So now let's kind of use the same situation. Player 1 opens after the turn for 10,000. Player 2 goes,
15,500.
Correct. At that point, if he still has chips behind, then the 50% rule would take place. So it's like, well, can you make it that? Is that a valid raise? Let's figure that out at that point. Which you would have to say, no, he needs to make it 16,000, put an extra $500 chip. You still have chips behind. Next player to, next action. But because he's all in, that rule is kind of set aside. And at that point, in order for the action to be open to that original raiser, they need to have at least a minimum bet outright. No 50%, no bonus, no nothing like that. Like, it has to just qualify on its own. It's a pass-fail versus what's the tipping point for where it needs to go, right?
Yep. Very good way of explaining.
I love that.
And I know that
pass-fail versus the tipping point. What?
A lot of people are like, I get this, I understand. It comes up so much more than you'd ever realize it.
No, it does.
People still get confused about it.
And it's not confused. It's just a misapplication of the rule. It doesn't apply in this particular moment because the player said all in. And the idea is, and it's something we're going to talk about a little bit later, is that you've got a third player in the hand. Normally it wouldn't matter. If it was heads up, doesn't matter. I bet 10,000, you go all in for 10,800. Nobody cares about anything else because I have to decide if I want to call or fold. There's no re-raising because there's only 2 players left in the hand. But the idea here is that when there's a third player in the hand, this is what this rule is set up for, so that way you can protect that third player. If he decides to call the all-in for your example, 15,500, it comes back to the original raiser and he goes, I want to raise, I'm all in. He's not allowed to do that. His only 2 options are my favorite thing to tell people. You have 2 options here, call or fold. That's it. You don't get any other options because you've already raised a hand and the action.
And nobody raised you.
Right. You don't get to raise yourself. And that's why this rule is set up this way.
So before we go on, pro tip, if you see a guy's only got 15,500 and the blinds are 2-4, raise enough to where if he goes all in, he raises you so that you can reopen it.
Again,
don't
if
make
there's,
it 10,000.
Right.
That's bad.
Yeah. The blinds are only 2-4. What do we say? It was 3-6. But it doesn't
no,
matter.
It's at 2-4.
Right.
Make it 9. So then if he has 14,000, he can raise you because 4 to 9 is 5. 5 on top of 9 is 14. His 15,500 is now is a re-raise, and now you can do whatever you want.
Right, which means if the third player calls, then you can re-raise and box out the other guy and get the dead money in. Right.
Correct.
Which is the idea of what it is.
Be aware of stack sizes, especially when they're shorties, and how much.
And actually how many chips they have.
Right. It happens all the time in PLO games where you're like, oh, this guy's got 70. Well, cool. I'm going to make it. I can pot it to 40, but I'm going to pot it to 25 here or 30. So that way, when all these other guys who aren't paying attention call. Well, now
and
the guy
this guy's going to rip into $70 because he's getting such good odds, and that's just what happens.
And then
I'm the next guy to act. Now I can pot and re-raise, not yourself, but
you set yourself up. It's like a little alley-oop.
Correct. You're setting yourself up for your own one-timer.
Right. Whereas if you make it 40, everybody calls 40. The guy shoves for 75. Now it's called.
Only option is everybody just throws in another $30.
7 ways per set. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Instead of 2 ways with tons of dead money in the pot, and it's much better. So, using the rules to your advantage. Next rule is out of turn action. So kind of the same idea. This is more of like a pro tip how to deal with this, because when a player acts out of turn, and again, we are talking about Tournament Directors Edition. This is the tournament rule. TDA rules, you're at a big time tournament. This is what happens. There are 4 people in the hand, and the third player in action just bets out, raise, or bets out.
Skips 2 guys.
Completely skips 2 players and bets out of turn. What is the action, or what happens at that point in a tournament? TDA rules, Tournament Directors Edition. What do you do, Brando?
Well, so if the action doesn't change, then the bet stands. But if the action changes, then he can do whatever he wants. So it reverts back to the guy's turn who it actually is.
Correct.
He gets to decide whatever he wants to do. But if he checks and then the second guy checks, that third guy's bet is going to stand. Whereas if that first guy says, I'm going to bet $10 myself, well, now that action changed, and that third guy can now do whatever he wants.
And it's really unfortunate because I feel like this is people who know this rule can kind of not abuse it. And again, it's on the spectrum of angle shooting, which can go from very minimum to very, very, very negative cheating areas. I hate to use that word when it revolves around poker, but it can. And this is kind of one of them. I don't know if people do this on purpose, but like I might, in not being paying attention, right? You're listening to your iPhone, whatever the case may be, and you bet out 2,000. And then the guy's like, well, I didn't do anything. And then he ends up putting in 2,000 into the pot. In his mind, he's thinking, I'm just calling this gentleman's $2,000 bet, even though now the action has changed. The guy who bet out of turn gets to now raise even higher. Maybe he goes all in instead of just making a $2,000 bet. Yeah?
Yes.
Because the action has changed. He now gets to reopen that he can either fold, call, or check. Nope, that's not an option, depending on what it is. If the action has changed, he gets to change his action. The only way the bet stands is if you get a check or a fold all the way back to him when it's his actual turn. His or her turn, I should say.
So it can work out as a very large disadvantage for the guy who goes out of turn.
Mm-hmm.
Because say that middle guy has a set and he was going to bet because he's going to bet out a set because there's a flush draw out there, there's straight draws, whatever the case may be. He's going to bet to get value and protect his hand. Well, now he knows that like player 3, if he checks, is going to have to bet because he's bet out of turn. So he got all that information where all he has to do now is check, and then that guy's bet has to stand, and now he can plan accordingly to raise him or so he gets to know the guys.
Yeah, no, I never thought of it this way because it kind of works on both ways. As long as you know the rule and how it is applied, right? It's when you don't know that you could be taken advantage of or make a mistake that stinks. If you know what's going on and the guy jumped the gun and bets out in front of you, and again, you've got the nuts or a set, or you want to raise him, you would love to check raise the situation. All you need to do is check. His bet has to be what it is, whatever he said it was, and then I get to raise him and get that money in the pot. And again, it's like free information. The problem is when players don't know how the rule is applied, they throw out the chips and then the action changes and they get re-raised. It's like, well, hold on. I thought I was just calling the bet. No, it was your action. You got to decide. You bet out. Actually, it's your bet, not his. He gets to take it back and do it over again. And that's where it gets weird. So I always feel like the guy or girl who doesn't know the rules well enough kind of takes it on the chin if the other player abuses it.
This is where a good dealer would like explain all the options.
Like,
to them.
hang on, yeah. And again, it goes back to what I talked about previously. I hate to cut you off, but it goes back to what we talked about previously. If you are unsure or you don't know, don't be embarrassed to ask questions. I never understand why people are embarrassed to ask questions. I maybe have no self, I don't know what the word is.
You don't.
I'm just like, whatever. I have no problem flat out just asking you, like, why are we doing that? Or hold on. Let's back this up a second. Like, I'm not embarrassed, or I'm not, and I'm also not going to allow another player to be like, I don't worry about it. Just do it. Just check and then do. It's like they want to tell you what to do. And it's like, well, hold on. I need to understand. I want to learn what the heck is going on versus just getting bowled over into doing something different. Right.
Correct.
So moral of the story is ask questions if you are unsure. However, if you listen to this podcast, you would know. Now you know what the heck you want the guy to do. If you want his bet to stand, check. His bet stands, action's back to you. You get to make your decision knowing now that there's extra money in the pot. If you don't want him to bet, maybe you throw out a different... I've done it before where a guy in a cash game will bet like $400 into like a $500 pot, and he'll bet it out of turn, and then I'll just open with 100. And it's like a weirdo bet, right? Like it's like a value bluff that you do in a big pot in Omaha, and like the board pairs on the river, and you bet this teeny tiny little bet into this big massive pot, and the guy goes, "Whoa, nobody would do that unless they have like a massive hand. I'm out. And you get like this $40 bet to go through in a $500 pot because the guy missed everything, but you missed everything too. You're just bluffing for $40, and it's fantastic. It's my favorite bluff.
Those are the best. Sometimes it's just, hey, I got nothing, but maybe he's got nothing too.
Yeah, and it looks trickstery. Like, well, why? What are you doing? Like, you want me to call, don't you? Nah, I'm not gonna fall for it. I'm out. And then they're like, and then it's always my other favorite thing that happens at the table. And the guy goes, ha 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 ha. I only had ace high, and then I'm always like, ha 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 ha. Ace high's good.
Yeah. Yeah, you bluff with the best hand, buddy. Or yeah,
you are bluff. You actually did have the winner. We both missed, and your miss is better than my miss.
Yep.
So action out of turn. Make sure you understand how that works. Again, if the action changes, that person's bet is going to change as well. If the action stays the same, as in it was check, check, third player who bet out of turn, his bet is going to stand, and then the action continues as normal. If one of the two previous players decides to open up on their own, at that point, the action changes and he gets a new redo.
So if you know the rules, then like this turns into your advantage because that
Correct.
player is giving you information out of turn that you normally
free
wouldn't
information.
have had.
Right. That's what that's what we're hoping people get to do. All right. Next Tournament Directors Edition question is the 1-chip/2-chip rule.
Well, I mean, I think most 99% of poker players know that one chip, if you throw one oversized chip in the pot without saying anything, it's going to be a call. But a lot less than 99% of players know that this applies to the blinds as well, where if you're the small blind and you have $1 out there because you're playing 1-3 and you throw a red chip to make it 6,
which is a stand. That's the min raise, like
which is an oversized
You fully
chip.
intend to raise.
But you only flung one chip in there.
Correct.
That is just a call.
And then everybody always goes, whoa. How could it be the 1-chip rule? There are 2 chips in the pot. But the small blind does not actually count. It's considered dead chips, dead money.
Dead money.
And it does not actually count, which means at that point, here's another funny one. It's kind of the same idea. So the 1-chip rule is very easy. We'll get to the 2-chip rule here in a second. I want to stick with the 1-chip rule for one more minute. On the 1-chip rule, same scenario. You're the small blind or the big blind, but I guess we'll stick with the small blind scenario. Everybody's limped in. You're the small blind, and if you want to make it $6, just juice the pot a little bit, and you just throw in one red $5 chip. That's just a call. It doesn't count. Even though you have $6 in the pot, the dealer's going to kick back your $1, your small blind that was in there, and you just called, even though you intended to raise. Now, what happens, or what are the players' options when they scoop up the $1 chip, their small blind, and then they have not said or acted or done anything? What are their 2 options, or 3 options, or 4 options? What are their options, Brandon?
Well, once they pick up the $1 chip, they can raise or call.
Yeah,
that's it, right?
That's it.
You confuse me with your 3 or 4 options. They can still raise. I mean, yeah, if you pick up the $1 chip and then throw the $1 chip and the $5 chip in there, you made it 6.
Correct.
You also pick up the $1 chip. You can throw in. You can replace it with a 5 or add 2 more whites to it and call.
Correct.
That's it.
Yep. Your only 2 options. You cannot fold at that point. And that was the only reason of that, because I've seen some people do it where they'll like pick up the thing, and then obviously, why would you think you could pick up your $1, but like take your $1 back? Be like, I'm going to fold this hand. I'm just going to pick up my small blind, put it back in my pants. You don't get to do that, folks. All right, 2-chip rule. Give us the 2-chip rule, Brando.
All right, so I
feel like this one's more commonly misused, or it's confusing to people.
Yeah, so we are gonna say that we're in a tournament and the blinds are 100, 200, and then the first guy just throws in 600, a brown chip and a black chip. He makes it 600, very legal raise, using only 2 chips.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
Next guy up has whatever. He's got a full whatever. He throws in 2 brown chips. 1,000. We already
hold on.
reviewed
let's not use colors. He throws in what 2 denominations?
2 500 chips.
There you go.
For 1,000.
Ah, that makes more sense. I heard 2, but anyways, go ahead. I was confused about it. So the blinds are 100, 200. Gentleman makes it 600 to go. Next player throws in 2 $500 tournament chips.
So we just reviewed 12 minutes ago that if a guy makes it 6, then the minimum raise is 10. And the same thing, if a guy makes it 600, the minimum raise is 1,000. So based on that rules that we talked about 12 minutes ago, he just raised from 2 to 6, 6 to 10.
Right.
Correct or incorrect?
That's what the idea would be.
Right. But this is where the 2-chip rule comes into play. And it says, no, actually, he didn't raise. He just called.
Correct.
Do you want to explain why?
Sure. I like this one. This is a cool rule. So the idea here is that if a player throws in 2 chips, what you do is you take the larger denomination chip out or the smaller denomination chip out. In your example, it doesn't matter.
I think if you remove either chip.
I think you do it both ways, but yeah, I think it makes more sense to take out the smaller denomination chip. So in this case, there is no difference because it's 2 $500 chips, but when you throw in 2 chips and you don't say anything, obviously if he said raise, it would be a $1,000 raise. And it's a legal raise. It's unorthodox, but you could make it that, right?
Right.
If you don't say anything and you just throw in 2 $500 chips and the dealer's like, he's not going to guess which way it is, in their mind, what they do is they take out one of those 2 chips, let's say the larger denomination of the 2, and you're left with 1 chip left in there. The idea is that 1 chip enough to call or raise? In this case, the blinds are the bet is 600. 1 chip is less than what you need to make a call, in which case it's just a call. And that's where the 50% rule comes in. So it gets a little bit different if you have 2 different chips of different denomination.
Like I think we can use
We'll use the same example
with a green $25 chip and a red $5 chip.
I was going to go with a little bit easier. We'll stick with the tournaments. So in your scenario, you said the gentleman throws in 2 $500 chips, 2 purple chips, 2 brown chips, whatever the case is. He throws in 2 $500 chips, and then it doesn't say anything to the dealer. The dealer has to go, all right, I got to take the larger denomination of the 2 out, which is still a 500. You're left with 1 chip left in the pot, a $500 chip. That's not enough to raise. It's not even enough to call, which means the player just called. Correct?
Yes.
Correct.
And
now
can I
yeah,
really
go
quickly?
ahead.
The reason that this rule's in place is because if the guy only has $500 chips, how can he call?
Correct.
The only way he can call is by throwing in 2 $500 chips.
Yep. He doesn't have any change. He's just making it. I call and throwing it in. But again, he's not saying anything or she's not saying anything. So that is the issue here. If you're just vocal about it, if you just say call and you could throw in your cell phone if you want, doesn't matter. You called.
Yep.
But it's the nonverbal action is what we're trying to determine as a tournament director what is going on. So again, 2-chip rule. Same scenario, 2 different chips. Let's do it this way. The blinds are still 100, 200. Player makes it $600. Next player throws in 2 chips. A 1K chip and nope, that doesn't work.
That's what I'm saying.
Because clearly at that point you're raising. But let's just use the same scenario because it I don't know why you would throw it in, right?
I think that's why I think you would need to do something along the lines of we're in a cash game of $1, $3, and a guy makes it.
It works when the blinds are up higher, but
a guy makes it 13, and then the next guy throws in 30. That still doesn't work.
We're trying to find the right scenario here.
I think 600.
Here you go. Let's do it this way. Blinds are 100, 200, and the same idea. Under the gun makes it 600 to go. It's a raise of 400. Next guy throws in 2 $500 chips. Well, what did he do? Well, he actually just called because if you take one of the chips out, you're left with a $500 chip. That's not enough to call, which means it's just a call. He has to call at that point. So the dealer can, at that point, knows he has to make change. Let's say the next guy goes in and raises to 1,200. He actually does raise. He makes it 1,200. Yeah?
Yep.
Then another player in the hand throws out 2 orange chips, $2,000 chips. What is his action?
Call.
We're really making it weird. So the idea here is that if it's a bet of 6 and then the next guy makes it 12 and then the next player, the 2-chip rule applies when he just throws in 2,000, was he calling or is he raising that $1,200 bet? There's a better example.
But again, it's still two 1K chips.
Correct.
The chips aren't different, but that's still just a call.
Oh yeah. How do we get two different chips? Well, we're really making an example of how the 2-chip rule works when there are two of the same denomination.
Right, because that's easy. But I think it's very tough. You have to use a 5K chip and a 1K chip somehow.
Yeah.
So,
which would be weird. I don't know why you would ever throw it out there. But again, the rule is in place so that if this does happen, and we're very bad at coming up with a specific example, but the idea is if you take out the lower denomination chip, you have to use the bigger denomination chip if there is a raise or not. So that's where the 1-chip rule kind of gets weird, or 2-chip rule gets weird, is when you're throwing in a big denomination chip like a 5K and a 100,
Well, that's another.
There's an example. Let's say the guy's only got 5,100 in chips left, and he throws out 5,100. Doesn't say anything. It's the $600 bet from the first player. He throws out a 5K chip and a $100 chip. What is his action? He didn't say anything.
What's the situation? Like, he's facing what?
Blinds are 100, 200. Player 1 makes it 600 to go.
Yep.
Player 2 has only a handful of chips left. 3 5K chips and a $100 chip. He's taking a beating here in the deep stack early on, right? And he throws out.
So he throws out 5,100 because
5,100. Because in his mind, he's thinking this is going to make it easier math for the dealer to make change, which is maybe clearly a wrong message to send. But there's the example that we're looking for. He throws out 2 chips, doesn't say anything, a 5K chip and a $100 chip. What is the action?
Raise.
And why?
Because you take away the $100 chip and the 5K chip is still enough to make a raise.
Correct. You always take out the lower denomination chip that's in there, because it could work with 4 chips, 5 chips, 6 chips. Doesn't matter. If you throw out a 5K chip and $400 chips, you take out one of the lowest denomination chips, and then at that point you say, with what is left, is there enough to call? Well, yeah, clearly there's way enough to call. All right, now let's go, after we know it's enough to at least call, is there enough to make a minimum raise? And that answer is also clearly yes. So there's the idea of where it goes in and out, because it also works if the guy threw out a 1K chip and a $100 chip on a $600 bet. He's making it easier, so the dealer just kicks him back a $500 tournament chip in change, right?
Yeah.
So that's where the 2-chip rule comes in, where you have to decide between the higher and the lower denominations of chips. So
I know we spent a lot of time on this, but one spot that comes up kind of a lot is, let's just fast forward, we're in a cash game and a guy bets $130, and then the next guy calls the $130, and then the lady has 2 black chips, and that's all her only 2 chips, and she puts them in the pot and doesn't say anything. Is she all in, or did she just call?
Right. Which one is it?
And I honestly don't know the answer. I feel like me and Ryan and Ford,
because it's so weird, because you threw in all of your chips, so I'm all in.
It's the only way she can call is
Correct.
by throwing in
both black chips.
But she's thrown all of her chips in the middle of the pot.
Right.
Is she all in?
My feeling is at that point, you'd have to defer to the 2-chip rule. If nobody can decide what the heck was supposed to happen, and she's like, oh, no, I wanted this, and a player's unhappy with that reaction, whatever the case is, then at that point, you would just use the 2-chip rule. It was a $130 bet. You take one of the denominations out. They're the same, so it doesn't matter which one you take out. You take out one black chip, and it's $100 into a $130 bet, which means she did not have enough in there to call, which means she has to at least call. She's not allowed to do anything else other than call. She gets $70 and change. If she intended to go all in or not, that's one of those times in life that you need to understand these rules. I mean, this is why we're telling people that's a much better example to describe the 2-chip rule and how it can affect you from both sides of the coin or chip, however you want to look at it. Is that
because she had the nuts on the river
and she wanted to raise, but she didn't say all in. And she just threw out 2 chips, and nobody's going to know what her intentions are. And you don't get to say them after you already make the action of putting chips into the pot. That's the danger of not saying what your intentions are. If you know what you want to do, just say raise. Throw in 2 black chips. Everybody knows you just made a 200. Field goal. Make your choice.
So this is
no
why
discrepancy.
The rules suck, though, because if she had 40 red chips, which is the exact same 200, and just put those all in, then it's a raise all in.
Absolutely.
So it kind of sucks. She
You
really
need
needs
to
know
be
the
aware of
rules,
the rules.
because it's $200 going in the pot in 2 chips and $200 going in the pot in 40 chips.
Right.
And it's the exact same movement with the exact same cards when it's on you, but it's two different.
Correct. You're referring to, instead of 2 black chips, if she had 2 stacks of nickel chips, $5 chips that she was pushing all in, then being that there was way more chips, they understand that is an all-in motion. It's all in.
Or even if she had 8 green chips, she's all in. But because she had 2, if she had 20,
any other
red
combination
chips,
works. It's the same idea that she only has 2 at that point. She's not allowed to say after the fact what she intended to do. That you just have to go with the 2 chip rule. Take one out. There's less than a call. It means you just call. That's it. You don't get an option.
And it really
to do
sucks because there's no other situation where you can put all your chips in and not be all in.
And look at it the other way. The other guy wants to call it because he has the nuts and he thinks she just punted off her last 200. And he's like, no, she put all her chips in. It's all in. This is where the rules are meant to keep the game and itself, the integrity. We don't need to guess, right? We can just go with math and say, well, here's the rule. It's a 2-chip rule. Bop, bop, bop. You guys now know what it is. Everybody's happy. We're already at about 40 minutes, which is surprising to me. I knew these rules questions were going to be tough, and we did stumble around the 2-chip rule for a long time, although I do feel much better about the ending result of that. It's difficult to describe this in an audio version because it's so much nicer to be able to show people when you talk about rules in a poker room. They always have like the cards and stuff out in front of you. It's like, well, here's this person's bet. Here's this person's bet. Here's the board. Here's how the action went down. You can see where the button is. It's visual. It's like the problem is so much more readily available to see the evidence and know what's going on. It's like trying to describe somebody a murder scene, and it's like, well, how the heck do you do that and give it justice, Yeah. It's difficult, folks. So we're going to thank Brandon for helping us with this one.
So we're going to keep that our last one, which we thought we were going to talk about the most.
The big one, the one that you and I argued about for at least a while. We're going to keep that for this is Tournament Directors episode 101. This is the 101 course, the basic.
Yeah.
I think this is clearly something that we can spend some time on, which is good. We'll do one last simple one because I think this is the most simple version, and it's something that people argue about. And I'm like, this is so easy that I can't imagine you would argue about it.
Oh, and this one tilts me too.
It does. It's very upsetting for a floor person to get called over for this. I know I said don't ever feel bad about calling the floor over. This might be the only time that you should feel bad calling the floor over because everybody knows this rule, and you just do it. There is a river, a bet, a call. All in, call. The person who went all in was the first person to act. They roll over the nuts, and then the other person who called the all in wants to muck their cards. And are they allowed to muck those cards, Brandon?
No. All in a call in a tournament, both hands gets exposed. Doesn't matter if it's pre-flop. Everybody does it. Oh, ace, king versus sevens.
Right.
On the flop, oh, ace, king versus sevens. He flopped a flush draw. On the turn, oh, I got to fade this. Even on the river, when the hand's all the way over, both hands get exposed. You cannot muck. So don't try and dig your hand in the muck. And the same goes for the dealers. Don't just swipe that guy's cards in the muck because the guy showed the nuts and the other guy folded. The table is owed to see both players' cards.
I like it the way you described it that way. The table is owed to see those hands. They have every right to see
part of the
those
rules.
Hands. Well, it's just the rules. It's almost like you can't award the pot until you show. We say show, expose. You have to table both hands. Both hands need to be tabled. They're official tournament hands. They're all in. When 2 players are all in, regardless of any time during the hand, those hands need to be tabled.
And
can't just be like,
if
just run it out.
Shakes his head and mucks his cards because he doesn't realize he has a flush, and the dealer flips him over because he's all in. And they're like, oh, he's got a flush.
Mm-hmm.
It's a live hand. There's no dead hands in an all-in and a call. You can't kill your hand.
You cannot kill a hand. The dealer cannot kill a hand. The floor cannot kill an all-in hand.
Nope.
God himself cannot come down from heaven and kill an all-in tournament hand. It's the only time your hands are safe.
Your hands are safe. I mean, you can chuck in your cards any way you want.
They're up. You can't lose
They're
them.
up.
It's great. Well, that's going to do it for episode 24. Tournament Directors episode. Rules and regulations, common mistakes and misuses of the rules of poker. This is the 101 course. I like sticking with our kind of university-esque labeling of episodes.
Me too.
Yeah, it's cool. Today is August 11th. Hopefully we will see everyone and anyone who is in the Chicagoland area at the next CCG poker event. We're going to do a little shameless plugging here at the end. So check out ccgpoker.com/events to see where the next event is going to be in your neighborhood inside and around Chicago, Illinois. You could also check out the sister company to CCG, Central Illinois Charitable Games, CICG.com. CICGpoker.com. Same thing. Central Illinois Charitable Poker. There's really nobody else down there but us. So check it out. Have a good time. If you're in the Houston area, go over to Paramount Social. Give Mark a hello. Other than that, Brandon's phone has gone crazy. We're getting all kinds of feedback from him, so I don't know what the hell he's doing.
Oh, really? I'm not doing anything.
Yeah. Do you have your TV on or something? What are you watching?
I got nothing on.
Thank God you didn't have Pornhub or something on.
No.
You would
terrible.
Never. No. This got awkward and weird. I'm glad this is how we're going to end episode 24.
Yeah, I'm done.
So, Brandon, lead us out of this episode. Give us your tagline. Goodbye.
Farewell, everyone. See you next week with Rules 201.
Rules 201, episode 25, halfway to 50. See you next time, everybody.